Happy Thursday, or whatever day it is that you may be watching this post live session. Thank you for tuning in to our weekly Bhagavad Gita and yoga philosophy studies. We are here today to dive into chapter 3 again. Chapter 3 of the Gita has a heavy emphasis on karma yoga. In traditional or classical yoga, there are three main paths of yoga, they say, and they are karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga. And so Krishna goes through these three paths of yoga, three different ways that you can approach the practices of yoga. And we see here in the Gita how Krishna is sort of laying out these concepts. And this is where sort of our modern day yoga philosophies that we get from people like Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, are heavily influenced by these earlier writings and teachings that are found in the Bhagavad Gita. So thank you all for joining us. Those of you that are here live, we got our ride or die crew here today. So good to be with you all. Max, it's nice to see you, and Azriel and Megs and the team. It's wonderful to be here. So let's, shall we open with our invocation? All right, I don't have all the fancy share screenings that Jagai does, but we're drawing in his expertise and wisdom and insight as we chant this invocation. So Shri Guru Pranam, if you know it, we'll just do one Om and then Shri Guru Pranam. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, so for those of you who may be watching later and are wondering what we were just chanting, we do an opening invocation to honor the Guru, and it is loosely translated to mean we were born in the darkness of ignorance, like our eyes cannot see well, our eyes are not seeing, so that dark ignorance is from the inability to see. And the Guru has the salve for the eyes, which is wisdom and knowledge, knowing, and they give us this salve for our eyes, and so we are able to see with that medicine that heals the eyes and the sight. So we honor our teachers, and then Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya is honoring Bhagavan. So the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, Bhagavan, Bhagavate, so unto Bhagavan, we give honor as we are about to read about Bhagavan. So let's dive in today. We're on chapter 3. If you have a Gita, you're welcome to follow along. Chapter 3. We are on let's pick up at verse 10.
Excuse me, teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Can I be the first reader, please?
You sure can. So why don't you read text 10?
And how many do I read?
Let's read 3 each in the spirit of Jagai.
Go right now?
Yep, go for it. And if you read one and somebody wants to comment, we can all comment. If you read it and you're like, wow, that's interesting, I don't know what to think about that, we can have a discussion, or we can just read through 3 at a time and pause anywhere we feel like we want to take a little deeper dive.
Okay. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this yajna sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation."
Good. So this is in reference to the previous verse, right? Work done as sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. And so now Krishna is just starting to talk about how for a long time, or in, back in the beginning days, essentially, um, you know, the people were given rituals. You know how we talk about there's the flowery Vedas and all the rituals, and then there's like the essence of bhakti of just having devotion, and you don't need to do all the rituals, like it's what's in your heart and how you apply it to everyday living. And so Krishna is talking about this sort of timeline. And to me, it's important to note that like different practices and teachings come along at different times. And I think that they come along either because there is an evolution in the people and or alongside because the people need to evolve. For example, Buddha, right? They say that Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu, right? One of Krishna's many incarnations. But Buddha, when he came, Buddha was a prince in India. He was raised in a very traditional Vedic culture, all the rituals and all the stuff that we're studying and learning about. But he left the palace, and he actually Siddhartha, when he was Siddhartha, he had a teacher named Vashista. So if you do yoga asana, you may know Vashistasana. Who knows what pose that is? Side plank. But it's named after the sage Vashista. And he
Side planks are very hard.
They are. And so Vashista was a teacher in this particular kingdom and dynasty. And he was there when Siddhartha was born, and he was one of the people who gave the premonition to Buddha's father, Siddhartha's father, the king, that said, he will be known all over the world, but not for ruling the kingdom the way that you do. Basically telling the king like he's going to be world renowned, but he's going to renounce the whole way that you live. He's going to renounce it, and he'll be known all over the world for it. And the father didn't like that, and that's why the father kept Siddhartha really what's the word I'm looking for, when we're like enclosed and sheltered,
Yeah.
right? Kept
He
him
was
very
keeping him,
sheltered from life.
he was keeping his son sheltered from the suffering of the earth because he did not want Siddhartha to see the unhoused people, or he didn't want Siddhartha to know about death. So he cocooned him.
Hmm.
He cocooned him into a bubble, and he didn't want him to see any of those sufferings.
That's
But
right.
Siddhartha saw that that was a lie that he was living. He escaped from the palace and he was going on an adventure, and he saw his very first unhoused person. Unhoused is a more polite and loving term for homeless. Homeless has negative connotations and demonization. So, Siddhartha saw an unhoused person, and he wanted to learn more about this suffering that his father kept him from.
Yes. That's a very accurate portrayal of the story of Siddhartha as he is journeying to become the Buddha. And so he goes on this adventure. He definitely gets out and sees things, and then he's like, I'm leaving the palace. But as he's growing up, he has this teacher, Vashista. And when he leaves the palace, he's actually renouncing all of the Vedas. This is not a commonly taught aspect of Buddha. Is he actually, that's why Buddhism, the school of Buddhism, renounces the school of yoga. They don't agree with the school of yoga because
Oh,
Buddha was like, I'm not down with, like, all of that is just nonsense. None of it matters. You just have to connect within yourself. You just need to go within and connect within, right? And he took some traditions that were very material, anthropomorphized aspects of religious tradition and culture that got lost in the material aspects of the ongoings, the festivities of the ritual, rather than the sacredness of the ritual, right? They got a little disconnected. It's like holidays for us. Like a lot of us celebrate Christmas, but are we really celebrating the spirit of Christmas? Or whatever the tradition is, that you may practice or celebrate, and so Buddha renounces all of these sort of yogic Vedic teachings, and he says, give up the religions, like just give up those traditions. And he embarks on his journey, and he tells Vashista to him, they have a conversation, and he's like, I reject all your teachings. I don't, and he wasn't mean or rude about it. That was his conviction, is I'd reject this, and there's suffering, and how do we alleviate suffering? And so Buddha goes out, he has his journey, and he actually, becomes Buddha, the enlightened one. And I'm fast forwarding through a lot of stuff. But to get to the end point with Vashista and these different teachings is Vashista heard about this enlightened one, and he thought, I bet that's Siddhartha. And I hope to cross paths with this effulgent one that everyone is talking about. And one day they do cross paths. And Vashista sees this effulgent being kind of walking through the village that he's in. And he's like, I bet that's Siddhartha. And they meet each other, they greet each other, they talk. And Vashista bows to the Buddha. And he's like, I honor you. And so there isn't a quarrel around, you were right, I was wrong, this is the way, that's not the way. It just was a respectful, like, there's many ways to do things. And Buddha came in, they say, at a time to sort of create a renaissance of getting back to the essence of what a lot of these ritualistic festivities are meant to do, which is just to get us to connect to something inside that's within us, this source, right? And have that loving devotion towards it in whatever way that manifests and whatever words we put to that process. And so here in this verse that Meg's read for us is Krishna speaking to like these sort of different timelines where different approaches to spirituality are appropriate for that time, or it's an appropriate part of the evolution and timeline of human society and human consciousness. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Thoughts, questions, comments? Megs?
So essentially, what I was seeing in this is that Krishna was actually practicing the four agreements by Don Miguel, the book. So the four agreements is be impeccable with your word, don't make any assumptions, do your best, and
Don't
don't
take
take,
it personally.
yeah. And that's what Krishna was doing. Krishna did not take it personally what Siddhartha said when he said, I renounce all of that. I don't even buy into that. There is suffering. And Krishna stood in his love with no ego, and he did not take that personally. And that's a very good example for us humans, because Krishna is showing us in this verse how something can potentially be offensive, but you don't need to take it that way. You see the bigger picture of it, because Krishna could have got in a fight with Siddhartha, and he could have been all sad and in his feelings that Siddhartha renounced all of that, but he made a conscious choice not to.
Mm-hmm. Asriel. Thank you for that, Megs. Asriel.
That reminds me of two things. One was a story that Jagai told us that is in the Bhagavatam of the husbands of this family in Vrindavan were busy doing the sacrifices and trying to do the rituals, trying to do all of it perfectly. And the wives had so much love for Krishna in their heart that they were able to see Krishna where the husbands weren't able to, even though they were doing all the stuff that they thought was like the right stuff. And then also, it reminds me of, I think it's called the Yugyas, which is like the 4 seasons of the universe. And Jagai said when we were the tea time and stories.
Yugas, like Kali Yuga
Yugas. Okay. Yuga.
time,
Yuga.
the particular
Yuga.
season of time that we're in. Yeah.
Yeah. So right now we're in Kali Yuga, which is like winter or like death, one could say. And he mentioned that in each yuga, yuga. Okay. There were different ways of sharing the scriptures and sharing knowledge. And like, I guess the first yuga was everyone just like sat in meditation, and that's how they obtained knowledge. And then this next phase was everyone started sharing things verbally, and that's how they obtained the information. And then I guess the next phase, I think we're still in that phase, or I'm not sure. I'm a little confused about that, but it
There are
really
cycles
goes to
seasons, right? There are cycles
Mhm.
of seasons. And so the way that we move about life when it's summer is different than the way we do when it's winter. Our
Right.
understanding and perspective of nature is different, looking at things during those different seasons. And there's things that are appropriate for each season. So when we look at the yugas, because these verses that we're about to get into is basically Krishna talking about, at this time there was these practices and at this time it was here, but we're here and this is what is appropriate for you,
Mm.
right? Like what healthy boundaries for a 15-year-old are different than healthy boundaries for a 35-year-old. Like what's appropriate for you in that season of your life will change as you go through different seasons. The lessons that you're learning, like what a third grader learns in third grade is different than what a ninth grader learns in history class. It's appropriate for that time and that season. And so it's not that one is better than the other, or one is right or wrong, or one has the truth and no one else does. You know what I mean? There's no one special group that's like, we are the end all be all. And
They think so sometimes.
they think so. But that's why I love these verses. And sometimes it can be seen as, or it can be translated and perceived as Krishna is saying, like, don't do any of that stuff. And in essence, he is to Arjuna. But there's this aspect of a Sanskrit word that is often used in Buddhist traditions called upaya. And upaya is to give a teaching that is appropriate for the student in front of the teacher. So, like when you hear of teachers, like Buddha did this all the time, he would give advice to one person in their questions, and then, but someone may ask a similar question, but he'd give them a totally different philosophical answer because that person is in a different place, a different season in their learning journey than the other person. So upaya is the art of giving sort of very specified teachings for the context and the individual and the being in front of you,
Mm.
and
Guess,
not
guess, guess what?
yes.
You are doing upaya. You do upaya to me when
That's right.
when you're teaching me, because I don't even understand the stuff like the others. And I notice that you always do upaya to me so I can be connected and not get so lost.
I appreciate you noticing.
Yeah, I'm grateful for your upaya.
Thank you. And I think upaya is important. It's not a very common talked about concept. And in fact, a lot of teachers will be criticized because they seem contradictory. But when you bring in this element of upaya, you can see why. And so here, as Krishna is talking about the Vedas, and often you hear these sort of people pulling things from Gita verses to kind of, in some way, be a little condescending of like, oh, poo-pooing on the flowery Vedas. And it's not meant to poo-poo on, and it's less than. It's just not appropriate for this context. We're in a different time. The Kali Yuga is a totally different time. It's a time of quarrel and hypocrisy. And we are owning that one right now. Quarrel and we are living it to the T, right? and the Sattva Yuga, the beginning cycle phase, is purity. That's why all they had to do was meditate. Like, their ability to connect to divinity was just, it was so present, because they were still, as humans, we become denser and denser. If you want to put it into sort of modern day popular terminology, it's like we're 3D people trying to advance to 5D consciousness. Like, we want to go higher dimensionally, but we have to be in our light bodies, right? Our human body matter density, right? And so because we're so dense, we less light is coming through. And so in the Sattva Yuga, we were less dense and more light could come through, more consciousness could come through. And so we can look at that however we want. We can look at it as a material level. Sometimes I think about it as like the technology that's around us, the density of those materials. People have like tons of piercings just all over, like, and like to wear metal all over the place. And so what was appropriate during the Sattva Yuga is not always applicable, because it's incompatible with where we are now. And so now we have different teachings for the Kali Yuga. Sometimes I ask people like Gauravani, Raghu, I've asked Radhanath Swami, I'm like, Krishna said that he would come really, like, when people were unrighteous and their dharma was like totally being lost. And I'm like, where is Krishna? Where is he? He should be here right now. And I always get the same answer, which is he's here in his holy name. That's why in the Bhakti Yoga tradition, they teach so much. Chant the holy name. That Krishna has come, and he does come in different forms at different times. That's why I'm like, where is he? He's in the form of the Maha Mantra. And I just find it interesting, maybe coincidental, that the Maha Mantra is becoming one of the most widely known mantras. Like in the Western world, especially, it's like most people know, at least in the kirtan scene especially, is the most commonly known. Like, everyone's heard that. Everybody's heard the Maha Mantra. People are listening to it on their D-Day Dress albums, and it's being played in yoga classes. And so that's just something to think about. Let's continue reading. I hope I set a little bit of a context here for you so that we can kind of see how Krishna is delivering these teachings to Arjuna. So Megs, would you like to read? Yes, that's what Chaitanya wanted. What a great coincidence to be talking about the mass spreading of the Mahamantra, taking it out into the streets for everybody and not just for the pujaris in the temples. So Megs, would you like to read the next two verses?
Yes, please, but I need to ask, or I want to ask you something about being less dense and getting in more lightness.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I just say this before I read it. What about astral projection? If somebody is involved in astral projection and they leave their physical body when they're sleeping, don't you think that they're less dense when
Yeah.
they're projecting, and then they can maybe be tapped into 5D if they're in the astral plane?
I would agree. My opinion would be that makes sense. They're more in their light body. They're able to travel different places and with their consciousness, light, like the effulgence of the light, but also the lightness, like not as heavy on so many levels. So yeah, absolutely. All right. Shall we move on to the next verse?
Yeah, verse 11, right?
Yep.
Okay, the demigods, um, like, the demigods, like what's her name? Kali, like Kali and get, what's the elephant?
Ganesh.
Yeah, don't say that I asked that. I just forgot for a quick second.
You
Um,
too. Listen.
yeah, there it is. Yeah, so like the demigods like Ganesh and Kali being pleased by sacrifices. Wait, show again, Max.
Tiny little Ganesh.
Whoa. Okay. Hmm. Being pleased by sacrifices will also please you, and thus by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all.
Beautiful.
I don't know what they're even talking about.
Well, to me, this reminds me of what you see in many indigenous traditions when there is an honoring of this idea that there are certain aspects of source, like the wind gods, right? Grandfather sky and grandmother moon, and like we sort of give these personalities to the seasons and to aspects of nature. And in pagan traditions you have this too, where they're honoring the divinity, the energy behind the manifestation of the physical thing, and not necessarily just thanking God, but thanking a being that they believe is in charge of that thing, right? Like the Native Americans and the rain gods, and all the other different divine gods that they pray to, all, so such a wide range of them. And so Krishna is talking about this practice and how that this does happen, like being in honor and reverence of the residing, the entities, the energies, the deities, whatever you want to call them, that reside over controlling or being a part of the play of that part of nature, right? Like we worship Krishna, but we often, probably all of us, say we love Mother Nature. Right? We don't just say nature, we love Mother Nature, where we want to honor like the energy that is manifested in nature. And when we have a sort of reverential, symbiotic relationship that is sacred, it becomes reciprocal, right? When the indigenous people honor the earth, they had, bounty and abundance in their harvest, right? And so I think, to me, this verse is kind of touching on this idea that although they may be older traditions, and Krishna is saying, Arjuna, you're a warrior and this is the time that you're in and you should do your duty. You don't need to be doing all these rituals. He's sort of acknowledging that this is what these rituals do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, next verse then, unless we have questions.
In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods being satisfied with the performance of
Yeah.
you know, Jagai taught me in Azriel that we say yug yug, but you're saying a different thing.
So I'm saying something. So first of all, remember Jagai says you kind of smush the Sanskrit together. So you may not hear it because I'm smushing it together. So yagya. Think of it as YAGYA. But the G has a little, like, the food gnocchi? It's got that little N. Gnocchi.
Mm.
Yagya. There's a little guttural sound there, but yagya. Yes.
Okay, so take two. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods being satisfied by the performance of yagya will, how is that?
That was great.
Okay, will supply all necessities to you, but he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief.
I love
Well, why is he a thief?
because they're not grateful and they're just taking. They're just taking. It's this is like, I think an essential universal teaching that we find in all indigenous traditions of honoring you know, the source of which you are getting your resources. Think about it. When we talk about resources, we are taking a source and recycle, like doing something with it. So when we get resources, whether it be food or wood to build our homes, or whatever it is, the skin from an animal that is passed to make drums and other things, medicines from plants, when we're not in a space where we have gratitude because we are seeing that it's all sacred, and when we see things as sacred, we have reverence for it, and so we acknowledge whatever the energy is behind it that we associate it with, then there's a reciprocal relationship with this source energy in all of its manifestations. But when we don't, when we're not grateful and we just take, we just buy things and we don't think about where it comes from or how it was produced or the effects that it has on the planet, when we overconsume these things, when we don't do that, then we have a not symbiotic. What is the opposite of symbiotic? Disharmonious relationship, right? It's not harmonious. And that's what we're seeing today. We have such an inharmonious relationship with our environment. And so when we can have more reverence for things, there's a reciprocal relationship that happens. So just like in Native American traditions, they had the rain gods, they had, they prayed to Father Sky and Grandmother Moon and Mother Earth and all these things. In the Vedic traditions, they also have, right? They have Lakshmi. She's the goddess who's in charge of managing the material energy that we call abundance, beauty, wealth, prosperity. Saraswati, she's in charge of managing the manifestation of material energy that we call arts and knowledge and studying, right? The intellect. And you have Lord Shiva, right? He manages destruction and the underworld, right? And you have Ganesh. He is in charge of helping us get through our challenges, right? And giving us knowledge. And so they're all these beings that are, that's what we call deities, right? Or demigods. They have a position where they are helping to maintain this material world that we're in. It's like the president, but the president has all of his like cabinet members, and they do all the things. President is like, this is how we want to run the ship, and then they're like, they take the orders and they like, okay, we're going to maintain everything, the balance like this. Only the president could be more, doing it a little bit more harmoniously. But do you all get that? Does that make sense? Like Indra is seen as the god of rain. That's where we get the famous story of Govardhan Hill, when, like, you know, Krishna's father was gonna get ready for this ceremony that they do every year to honor Indra, and they make a bunch of food offerings and all kinds. It's a huge festivity, and everything is to celebrate and worship Lord Indra, who is known to be the most arrogant demigod of them all. He's super vain. and he and so Krishna knew this, and so Krishna told his dad, as they're preparing a few days before. Krishna is a little boy, and he's like, why are we worshiping Indra? We should really worship the hill, Govardhan Hill, because the hill is where the cows go to graze, and we get such great milk because they're eating the grass on the hill. And the bunny rabbits and the deer, they all get to go up there and play and graze, and that's where they love to hang out. And that hill is just providing so much beautiful sacred shelter for all these beings. We should worship Govardhan Hill. And so Krishna convinces his dad, and the dad convinces everybody, and instead of honoring Indra, all of a sudden they're worshiping this big giant hill called Govardhan Hill. And Indra sees this, and he is like, who is this little boy? Who does he think he is? I'll show them. They want to not worship me. They think this hill is more important than me. And he just makes it start to pour down rain. And it floods and it floods and it floods. And the villagers are panicking because everything is flooding. And Krishna's like, don't worry about it. I got you. Let's go over to the hill. The hill is going to save us. And Krishna picks up the hill with his little pinky finger on his left hand, which is to imply the weaker hand, the non-dominant hand. And he holds that hill up for days. And all the villagers are like, how is Krishna doing that? We better help him. He's going to drop the hill. They all grab their sticks and whatever, and they're all hiding under this hill, and it's just flooding and flooding and flooding. And Krishna's playing his flute. So he's holding the hill and he's playing his flute. And they're like holding sticks and they're getting tired. Days pass, they fall asleep. And again, it's just Krishna holding the hill, not missing a beat. And then, to make a long story short, Indra eventually figures out that Krishna's just not some regular little rascal boy, that he's Krishna. And he realized what a mistake he made and how arrogant he was. And he stopped the rain and he apologized to Krishna. So I share that story just to show how, like, there are these demigods and deities, according to this tradition, that they are in charge of maintaining certain aspects of the material world, so that there can be that part of Krishna that can like hang back and relax and have all these cool pastimes that we get to hear about. Otherwise, he'd be too busy working, maintaining it all himself. All right, you guys got your hands up? What you want to say? Max? Megs?
I raised my hand to respond to Megs's question, but I want to take a moment for an aside and just say I'm loving your teachings today, Dharma. I'm learning a lot. It's really great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Megs, I wanted to say that I interpret the verse like this, and this is just my modern twist and understanding and the way my brain has to put things linearly. But we can pray to God for rain or riches, and then we can have riches and rain, and we can be like, look at what I did. Isn't this great? My prayer brought this rain. I'm so good at praying. Or I'm rich and I earned it and I prayed for it and I prayed hard and this is my money. I earned these riches. And when we do that and we fail to recognize who we prayed to for where it to come from, that this is not really my riches. These riches belong to God. God gave me this blessing and I owe this blessing back to him. When we do that, we are certainly a thief. We have stolen the riches that God has blessed us with. So that's my comment.
It's great. It's super great. And I love that balance of like, this is how we can still, I still have Ganesh and Hanuman. I have so many deities all over the house, and I don't feel like I'm doing something wrong because I am not only just worshiping Krishna. I can honor that they're all part and parcel of the one whole, and I can recognize that like the representation of abundance is Lakshmi, but the source of that is Bhagavan, is source. There's still a source behind that, and to be grateful for the thread that it's come through in all of its many manifestations. But yeah, when we are ungrateful, when we think we did it, it's like intellectual property rights. Somebody will be like, I came up with this thing, and it's like, no, you didn't. You stole that. Try to pretend like it was yours. All right, Megs.
Well, I was being a thief with my donuts because I was going to Broadway Donuts and I was going there for 3 weeks in a row and I got a bunch of I ate 3 donuts every single week, and I was so selfish in my thievery because I ate them up so fast with chocolate frosting, and I did not think of Krishna. I did not think of Vishnu or any of the gods. I just gobbled up my donuts, and I was thinking that I did this all myself, and I'm being greedy with my donuts. And next time when I get some donuts, I'm not going to be a thief. Next time when I get my donuts, I'm going to say, Dear Krishna, thank you for this chocolate frosting. Thank you for this gluten. Thank you for this sugary substance in my body. Amen.
Amen. Nice. And you know what? Krishna ain't mad at you. It's all good. It's okay. Sometimes we get caught up in our human senses and we just devour something, whether it's a donut or it's a sunset or it's time with our friends, and we don't, I don't think we necessarily have to say specifically, thank you, Krishna. But when we feel a sense of gratitude overall for what we get to experience and what we have access to, then that is the same as if we spoke the words out loud. Speaking the words, praying over our food, are rituals that help us to remember to always be in a state of gratitude. Some of us are often vibrating already in that state of gratitude. So, Megs, I think that you are a person who really appreciates life and is grateful for many things. And so I think Krishna knows your heart and knew that you were so grateful to be eating scrumptious, chocolate frosted, gluten, sugary donuts.
Yeah. Oh, that's exactly right. Okay, so maybe I won't say thank you next time, but instead of just diving in to my goodness, I will take a minute to pause and breathe before I dive in,
Good,
right? And
Gita.
then I'm honoring the source.
That's right. You just take a moment to pause and breathe and thank you. You just say thank you. Thank you. There you go. Good. Awesome. Did we get through those 3 verses? I feel like you totally called in the spirit of Juggai, and I talked a whole lot. Okay, cool. So we talked about not being a thief. I like this. I like how Krishna sometimes uses these like kind of strong words. I feel like he's really, um, you know, Krishna is a prankster. He's funny. He likes to be, cajoling. And so that's how I imagine him saying this, like as he's saying it, he's implying like, come on now, don't be a thief. Be grateful. It's like when I tell my kids when they complain about things that they get and they're like, oh, but it doesn't have this. And oh, I like burritos, but not with onions. Oh, and I'm like, when you're not grateful for the things that you have, the universe begins to take them away. And so it's important that we practice this gratitude so that we stay in alignment with Source. Because just as much as we can just steal and complain and be thieves in the way in which we sort of are taking in life, um, the universe will respond in kind. Okay, who would like to read 3 more verses?
Asriel can read, but let me make a comment first. Maybe we can connect this to Upaya in the way that, some people like to learn with a harsh word, like we relate to that. And Krishna also, he breaks things down sometimes. He's like, you can do it this way. Or if you don't like that, you can do it this way. Or if you don't like that, you can do it this way. And a lot of these verses say the same things, just in a different way. So here comes Krishna
Right.
giving us what we need.
A
Hey,
master.
Azrael.
A master at Upaya, even phrasing the same options with different color so you can hear it differently and receive it differently, right? And go, okay, I can get down with that. Beautiful point. Okay, Azrael.
So, chapter 3, text 13. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin.
Sounds kind of heavy.
Is this talking about prashad?
Yes, so the word prashad means mercy. So prashad can be more than just food. The word itself means mercy, but what it is it's anything that is offered to Krishna, whether it was made and prepared and then offered on someone's altar and then it was given to you, or you offer it on your altar, or you offer it in prayer and in your, inside internally in your heart, you offer to Krishna, which basically means, like Megs was saying, you pause and you think of source and you recognize that what you have is coming from source. And so you offer back gratitude for the offering you are receiving. And when we don't do that, we're eating in sin, which, we could unpack what they mean by the word sin, right? Sin means to like go against your nature, to go against dharma or teachings, right? To do the opposite of. Um, I don't like to think of sin in the way that Christianity teaches us sin. To me, it means like we're off the path, we're out of alignment. And repentance means to turn back. It doesn't mean like you have to grovel for forgiveness by doing penance that is demeaning. It actually
For
means,
all of the emotions associated with that, like shame and
yeah, right. And you can do all those things and still be doing the same stuff. So, like, have you really repented? You can say your Hail Marys, you can make your offering to the temple because you're trying to make up, make good for it. But if you're still doing the same things, you haven't turned back. So sin is when we sort of turn away from the path. We renounce the path, or we're, and by the path I mean what is aligned for us. And in a broader sense, we're always on the path. But you know what I mean? When we know what we should be doing or what's right, what's correct, and we're doing the opposite. We're out of alignment with our higher being and source.
Yeah,
And
that's what sin is. The new age terminology for sin means out of alignment with your higher self, making a decision that's not in alignment with your higher self.
yep. And there's a lot of different teachings out there right now that are talking about this, being in alignment with your inner being. And it's interesting when I hear it because it sounds so much like what yoga was teaching, just with its own language. So again, Upaya, same teachings applied in a different flavor for modern times. It's okay. And so
sorry, I have to go.
you gotta go. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. This was lovely. I kind of enjoyed the change up a little bit. I will see you guys next week.
Yes. Enjoy your day. Um, so repentance is when we turn back to being in alignment, right, with our higher self. So our higher self is always eternally in gratitude. Our lower self is always temporarily in this mature world in selfish mode. In the I-ness mode, right? That is the eternal state of the ego, is I-ness. But the inner being, the source of who you are, your spirit soul, is eternally grateful, right? Eternally in gratitude for source, in a loving relationship with source that is filled with gratitude. So when we're out of alignment, when we don't exercise that in our human incarnations, right, then this is basically what it means by sin. Questions, comments, contributions? Okay, then we'll read the next verse. Max, did you want to read, since you were volunteering to go next? You can read the next one.
Sure, I can jump in. And you said questions, comments,
Contributions.
contributions. Mine was, that's where sense enjoyment comes in, when I was just connecting it back to the verse. Like when we're in the lower self that you were referring to, we're only acting for sense enjoyment. And Krishna doesn't say we can't enjoy our senses. We just need to perhaps honor where it comes from. We need to not be attached to always I need sense, enjoyment.
Yeah, and really slowing down instead of just being consumers, right? And just consuming whatever the sensory stimulation is: food, touch, visual, entertainment, sound. We're just sort of like, I think about like eating, like I have two boys, and so sometimes I'm like, wow, you just like scarfed your food down like a dog, like you inhaled it, because sometimes dogs do that, right? They just like, they don't even chew, they just put in their mouth and they swallow. There's no, it's just a very sort of, I want to say autonomic, like a nervous system response to just like put fuel in the body. Like just let's just do that. But there is also a devouring that happens when there isn't a space for just honoring the source of everything that is providing you what you have in front of you and taking that time to do that. Otherwise, we just go through all of life
Yeah.
just taking it all in and not ever stopping to just be in awe of like, wow, what I get to receive right now is wonderful and is a blessing, and just being, attitude, the gratitude, no, gratitude is the attitude of transcendence, they say. Gratitude is the
Yes.
attitude of transcendence.
Yeah, speaking of devouring, I feel like that's what um I feel like that's what we're saying with the donut thing, is like we were what you're talking about with your sons, of like just scarfing that donut down, and then talking about what Max is saying about just not even pondering where it came from, like the harvest of the wheat, of the gluten to even make that, the processing of the sugar cane to make the frosting. It's like you have to rewind and go back to the roots of all of these beings, both light beings and human beings. It's like all of these things made this one donut. And if you are not taking that moment, that brief moment, to just take it back a notch and see that, then you're just, I feel you're being gluttonous. You're just scarfing it down like your sons did. You're not even like paying attention to the beauty of whatever it is that you're blessed to even be eating.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great point. And let's unpack that a little bit. Like, I think in most sort of modern day organized religions that we see, or even, some historical ones, the gratitude, like why do we want to take a moment to be grateful? Like, what's the point? Like, how does that apply? What is the outcome when we do that? And I think that sometimes religion teaches us, that we're a bad person, and so now we're eternally damned, and there's going to be suffering because of it, right? Suffering due to punishment because of a behavior. Where this tradition differs, there isn't a punishment that God administers to you, but there is the law of karma, right? And so let's look at it from that perspective. Like when you're in a relationship, let's say you're in a romantic relationship and you're trying to be, really, you are naturally a sweet, nice, kind, giving, caring person, and it comes through in your actions and your behavior with that significant other. But that significant other, and you could replace this with a parent or a child or a friend, right? You're being a nice person, you're doing good things, and you never hear a thank you. And now, not that we should do things for a thank you, but what happens in that kind of dynamic when there's a lot of giving and not much appreciation? What happens usually to those types of relationships? What are the qualities of those relationships eventually?
I mean, those relationships deteriorates. One person gets disgruntled, they feel like they're carrying the heavier side of the burden, and
Mhm.
you know, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's exhausting,
It
really.
deteriorates and it's not symbiotic,
Yeah,
right? There isn't a symbiosis that's happening there. It's leaning a lot to one side per se, as opposed to relationships where there is a lot of reciprocity, giving and receiving, gratitude, acknowledgement, being seen. Like there is this reciprocity. What are the qualities of that kind of relationship? We
it's
like those. They
it's
feel
life.
good,
You're a team.
right? And
Yeah,
it feels good to feel good. And so I think of it this way, like Krishna's telling us this so that we can be in a good, loving, reciprocal relationship with Source and all of its source energy. And when we don't take the time, then that deteriorates our relationship with that thing, with that source energy. And it's not, if you do it, you're a good person, you're going to get to heaven. If you don't do it, you're a bad person and you'll go to the lower worlds. you know, you could speak karmically on like how that makes us progress, but it's not you're being punished because you didn't follow a rule. It's, hey, it's just common sense. When we are reciprocal in our gratitude and our appreciation, it actually grows. It's wonderful, like enrichment for growth in our lives, and it grows so many things in so many ways. And but Max, you chose a great word. When we don't have that, it deteriorates what we are experiencing. And so Krishna is, just touching on this with Arjuna, like, you can do these things and they have these impacts. Um, and he's going to continue to give him other options as well. So,
That gives me a great realization too, because like I know Krishna is saying this through your words, is like we're either attaching to him or we're attaching to the sense enjoyment itself. And
yeah.
so, that act of gluttony, if we want to call it that, it has a consequence. It has a physical consequence. We are more attached to this sense and are overindulgent of this sense than we are to the source, because we forgot the source when we went left for that attachment.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I think this is really wise to apply to romantic relationships, because um,
Mm,
it's things like this. And for me personally, I feel like romantic relationships, partnerships like that, they are an opportunity to really be in that sort of conjugal, loving relationship that we hear of Radha and Krishna. We get to have our own little smaller version of it, and we get to mimic it and experience little pieces of it. But if we do it in their footsteps, the way that they do it, but we try to do it in our human way, which is ends up being sense gratification and ego gratification, right? But when we're in that place of gratitude and appreciation, like Radha and Krishna are to each other, they have so many nicknames for each other, so many sweet songs and poems they sing to each other. And they're just, so you see how it amplifies, right? When we are in connection with gratitude and appreciation for source energy, it will amplify. When we are in appreciation for material energy and just material energy, it amplifies other things, right? More of the material stuff, which is temporary and therefore disappointing. And so when we connect to the eternal, it's just amplifying in that. So, yeah, I think, I love to apply these kinds of things to those situations. Okay, shall we?
yes.
One more verse?
Where are we? Are we on 13?
Yes. Oh no, next one, 14.
14. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, and yajna is born of prescribed duties.
This verse just reminds me of Native American traditions. And like in Egypt, they had their rituals they did for these things, right? So many cultures have traditions for honoring, um, the great beyond in whatever form they put to it, for providing grains, for providing the rains of the season, for, providing different elements and things that are resources that we get to utilize as human beings, that um, make our human life a little bit more comfortable.
Can you
You
explain
know
just
that
the last clause? Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay. I was just gonna quickly say that I think that's why the practice of puja is so beautiful, to like avoid giving gratitude and like seeing the holiness of where something comes from. It's like those that continually practice puja for every meal and like dedicating that to the gods, etc. It's like that is a practice of always remaining in that vibration.
That's right. In connection, as Max was saying, right? We're in the vortex, as Abraham Hicks would say. Okay, you wanted to go over the last sentence.
Yeah,
that last
Dharma, just
part.
the last clause. Yogya is born of prescribed duties. Can you
Okay.
expound upon
So
that for me?
I will share what I think it means,
Yeah,
and you
that'd be
can take
great.
this report and see how off I am. But Yagya is born of prescribed duties. So, like the pujaris, they are born typically into that dharmic duty, right? Like the caste system, the original caste system of like priests, right? Spiritual elders in the community, shamans, this kind of thing. And then you have like the ruling class, kings and things
Oh,
like that. And then you have the laborers, and then you have like the business workers, and then the laborers, right? And so each of them will have their own prescribed
prescribed duties.
duties of how they are to do their sacrifice.
Hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of that, and that's why I say the original caste system, because originally those castes were given to you based on your birth, like your what they believe to be your dharma, your nature, right? Like Arjuna is meant to be a warrior. That's the nature of him. That's the nature of his human personality in this lifetime, to fulfill that role and do those duties. And the warriors have their own way of performing sacrifices than the pujaris do that are in the temples all the time,
Hmm.
right? Okay.
Yeah, I got it. Makes sense.
Cool, good. Okay. I know the caste system is a little tricky because now we just like, it ends up being like, um, what's it called when you just like the power just stays within the family? Nepotism, where
Okay.
it's just like, it's in the bloodline and not
Mhm.
like in your nature. But originally it was like in your name, it was more divinely ordained,
Okay.
less like, well, you're the son of this person, so you're automatically in this caste, which is kind of where India is a little bit stuck in their culture present day.
Mm-hmm. I see
That's
that.
why there are these like great divides in the class system there, because it became very like nepotism, where it was just, your father was a priest and he was in charge of all of this, you're his son, and so that's the caste that you're in, instead of the caste system, which was really individually ordained.
I wonder
And
if
I'm,
that's
I'm
what
all,
they. Oh,
what next?
What's that?
No, you go, Max.
I was just wondering if that's where they got the little ceremony where the baby crawls towards the thing. Like,
Yeah.
it picks this thing, it'll be a lawyer. It picks that thing, it'll be
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Something like this,
Fascinating.
right? Like that plus astrology, because from your astrology chart, they can tell. Like when Buddha was born, when Siddhartha was born, they had the astrologers did his chart. The pujaris came in, they read the chart, and then they made their divine predictions
Mm,
of who Buddha would be. And they were giving blessings to Buddha. They didn't come in to give predictions. They came in to give blessing to Siddhartha at his birth, but reading his chart, giving the blessing that was particular to his nature, to like his dharma, right? The purpose of who he was meant to be here in this life. And then Vashista gives this premonition based on all of that, the process that they go through of divine, I guess I would call it divination, right?
mm.
Well, the other thing that we just noticed as examples of this, so Noah and his family, as portrayed in the Bible for Noah's Ark, it seems that they were also following the nepotism, like within Noah's family, and then just a lot of stuff that was going on, like how it's portrayed in the Bible. It seems like nepotism. But then from the movie The Giver, um, in The Giver, everybody like goes to the everybody in the city goes to like the leaders of the community, and they're sitting in the theater and they're waiting to be handed down, basically like in Krishna terms, like their prescribed duty. Like you're gonna be caring for the babies. Then this one dude was given like the actual role of holding all the memories for the society. But it's like, I feel like that wasn't nepotism, obviously, because that wasn't a family. That was like maybe like the caste system of like when the leaders are handing out jobs for every single person and everyone's like hanging by the edge of the seat to see like what role are they given. they're like not even picking it. It's just like
Random.
they're following that caste system, right? They're just like being given something. Like,
Yeah. So there are many variations of this sort of what I think originated from a pure concept. You think of it as like when we lived in smaller tribes and you had the shaman of your tribe, the elders of the tribe, and they can see you in a way that you don't see yourself. They can see your potential in the way that you don't see your potential. They can see your skills in the way that you don't recognize your skills yet. And the shamans, right, are the beings that in the community that have access to this, the other worlds, and connecting to the ethers and all the ancestors and spirit beings that are in the ethers. And so they're getting these divinations, messages from the great beyond. And so the combination of the elders and the shaman, they are letting the youth of the tribe know, like, no, this is the work that you're going to do because this is what you're meant to do. And often when we're young, when we're teenagers and we're young adults, we can't see what the wise ones in our community see in us. And so we often resist it. Sometimes we see it and it resonates and we're like, that totally aligns. I was meant to do this. And so we each have our own journey with that. But I think there is validity in these sort of older traditions, or I want to say more indigenous traditions, where we're using the wisdom of the elders and the spiritual leaders in the community for their insight to help us see our nature in a way that we're still trying to figure out when we're young. We don't know. We need guidance, and we're all here to like be mirrors for each other. So I don't like to throw out like the caste system just sucks, because as I learned more about sort of where the origins of these practices came from and how they've gotten twisted and manipulated and perverted over the many, many, many years that they've been put into practice, there's still wisdom in or what I think are the original practices, that these things come from, that we now get nepotism, right? Just keeping it in the family, and the corruption and the control of societies who are like, no, we know better for you, so you're going to do this and you're going to do that. I don't think that is good. But having insight and wisdom from the spiritual leaders and the elders of the community about who you are when you're at a place in your life where you don't really have the life experience yet to have that clarity. I think there's great value in that.
That's something that I feel like this tradition specifically teaches me. The Sri Guru Pranam, the guru puts the salve on our eyes that saves us from the ignorance of darkness. I really feel like, um, you know, there's a part of me that wants to learn things the hard way on my own, that has this American sense of independence. No, I'm not going to do it the way you tell me to do it. I'm going to do it the way that I think is right and make my own decision. But I've really, in my journey in Krishna conscious, have learned a lot, like how important and comforting it is to have humility, to know when I don't know, and to accept that there are people who have been walking in the journey of consciousness longer, who have wisdom to share that it would behoove me to listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what a relief it is too to hear from people that you trust in the community. And I'm speaking from personal experience here, when like I have it in my mind that my path is supposed to be a certain way. And because it isn't going that way, because I have kids and I'm all up in the city material life and I'm accumulating more and more stuff and I'm just contributing to consumerism and getting lost in the hustle and bustle of just busy life. I've have had in the past a tendency to feel like I'm a bad spiritualist. I'm not doing it right. I suck and I'm too entangled in material life. But I have beautiful teachers and friends, and teachers that are not even in the Bhakti ISKCON tradition. They come from totally different traditions, have equally told me across the board, it's not that's not your role this life, to like be out in the mountains all isolated by yourself, because that's what I want to do, is like just want to move
Yet.
to a cabin in Oregon and just live in the woods and have a nice little cob house and grow my own food and meditate all day and do yoga all day and just be zen. That's what I want to do. I want to go to India and just like live in a cave like some of the other
Yeah.
female monks who like I've always felt aligned with that lifestyle, but my life in front of me is not aligned with the way my life is taking me, is not that way. So I've been told that, I've lived that sort of monk swami life many, many times in many past lives, and that's probably why I feel a call like, oh, that sounds so good, because I know it's good because I've done it. But this lifetime is about being a householder for me.
Hmm.
And it's hard for me because there's a part of me that's like, I would love to do that over there instead. But I have my teachers who are like, but this is where you're meant to be. Don't you see? Like, you're good at it. Look what you're doing. Look what's happening. Like, this is where you're supposed to be. And I'm like, okay, all right, fine. I feel so bad about not being able to do that thing and trust that I'm doing my thing and I'm living my dharma. Okay.
Some parallels to Arjuna there.
Oh my goodness. So, it's good to have the teachers in our life to reflect back to us things that we're grappling with, and we can't see that we're resisting our own nature. We're resisting the very path that we chose to be here on in this journey. And that's what Arjuna is doing right here. He's really trying to resist, like, you know what? Forget it. I don't want to be a warrior. I don't want to be the fearless leader anymore. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, is this a good place to land? This is a great discussion today.
It is. I really have to say, Dharma, we're so lucky to have you as our teacher. And in this role, you do so much for the community and for all of us. I know team would jump right in and say all the things that I'm saying too. So thanks for letting me say that to you.
Thank you. I appreciate your appreciation. All right. Well, with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful, special full moon today. It is the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya, but it also is a very auspicious full moon and a good time to use your mind to look at how your heart feels. And what might come up are the limiting beliefs in your mind about what your heart feels. And those are the things we need to let go of this full moon. So take some time to think about that today and enjoy your full moon. And we'll see you soon. If you are going to be around in Long Beach next week, we have Kirtan satsang at the studio. I think we'll try to live stream it. It's going to be a special satsang. We are doing a fundraiser for Ukraine. There are devotees who are in Kiev, and they have a temple there, and they are right in the middle of everything. And I've seen some videos of the devotees that are there earlier on when it was all beginning, and I'm seeing photos now. And right now, what these devotees are doing is cooking prasad in the temples and making sure that people that are sheltering in the subway stations are being fed warm food. And so every day they are cooking and preparing massive amounts of food for many Ukrainians who are sheltering in the subways underground to protect themselves because they can't leave. There's no safe passage. And so the fundraiser is to raise money to send to these devotees through the Food for Life program, which is a nonprofit organization already set up, used all over India to feed unhoused individuals all over the place, especially minors and youth. So the money will go directly to them, and make sure that they have money to continue to buy foods so that they can cook and feed people. And so if you're not around, hopefully we'll live stream it, and there'll be like a PayPal link or something for you to donate if you'd like. And we'll have food there, and there's a raffle that's going to be happening, and a bunch of special guest kirtan artists. So we're hoping that Govindas and Radha will be there, and my dear friend Madhu from Laguna Beach. We love Madhu so much. He's so tiny and he's so big with his energy. And my friend Vasu from LA, who is a wonderful kirtanwala. Cooper Madison, who is really good friends with Govindas and plays at the Yogashala often and at Bhakti Fest. And a wonderful woman who is a devotee named Clytie. I really enjoy Clytie. She's so sweet. So we have a lot of really great people coming in to play some really wonderful kirtan and a bunch of different people making delicious prasad and a beautiful like table and like an Indian altar, which looks like a little house, but it's an altar space, like a dollhouse altar for
Okay.
Krishna and Radha deities or whatever deities you want. That'll be available for raffle as well. It's worth like $800. I imagine it's gorgeous. So, anyways, that'll be happening. We hope to see you there.
That is, oh my gosh, that's massive. And so that's exciting. And we just wanted to throw in the debut for the Gita dinners is next Saturday. The Gita dinner Krishna potluck. But we don't know if it's aligning with everyone's schedule. So we'll check in to see if we're debuting this month or not. And if not, we'll debut it next month for those that are in town. So we can start like just having just a dinner and a discussion over how Krishna consciousness is affecting our lives and just sharing personal stories about how we've been changed from Krishna.
So awesome. I think it's great. Wonderful. Okay, well, we'll stay updated and keep the communication and the WhatsApp about it going. All right, friends, enjoy your day. Blessed full moon. Sending love to you all. We'll close with our closing prayers. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha, kripa sindhubhya eva cha, patitanam pavanebhyo, vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hari Hari Bo.
Haribo. Good to see y'all.
Bye, Mahir. Glad you made it again.